I'll tell you about something I experienced in the summer of 2019. My name is Jack Moreland, and at the time of these events, I was 28 years old, fresh out of a bad relationship and longing for privacy. It wasn't hard to be tempted by a job posting I saw at the time. I was going to be away from it all for 6 months at the Granite Peak Observation Tower, located in the Sierra Mountains of northern Montana. It was a massive structure, 9,340 feet above sea level, low in the sky, with only a lush greenery visible around it. The nearest human community, the town of Whitefish, was 47 miles away as the crow flies, but the winding mountain roads made you feel like you were in another world. I arrived on a Tuesday in early June. The helicopter that dropped me off left me standing on a small clearing with 2 duffel bags full of supplies and personal items. The pilot, a weathered man named Hank, who looked like he'd seen everything twice, gave me a curt nod before lifting off. "You got the sat phone?" he shouted over the rotor noise. I nodded, holding up the bulky device. "Good," he yelled back. "Radio check-ins are every morning at 0700. Don't miss them." The helicopter tilted and swooped away, leaving me in a silence so profound it felt like a physical presence. The tower stood before me, a 60-foot-tall structure of weathered wood and steel. It looked like something out of another era, which I suppose it was. These towers were built in the 1930s by the Civilian Conservation Corps, and this one had been continuously manned ever since. I shouldered my bags and began the climb up the stairs that wrapped around the tower's exterior. Each step creaked under my weight, and I found myself wondering how many feet had walked this same path, how many lookouts had gazed out from this same vantage point over the decades. The cab at the top was a small square room, maybe 14 feet on each side, windows wrapped around all 4 walls, providing a 360-degree view of the surrounding wilderness. Inside, there was a narrow bed, a small propane stove, a table with 2 chairs, and most importantly, the Osborne Firefinder, a circular device mounted on a pedestal in the center of the room, used to pinpoint the location of smoke or fire. There was also a radio set up on a wooden desk, old but functional, with a microphone hanging from a coiled cord. I spent the first few hours unpacking and settling in. The tower had clearly been occupied recently. There were canned goods in the small pantry area, a half-used bottle of propane attached to the stove, and a logbook on the desk. I flipped through it, reading entries from the previous lookout, a man named Derek Sanchez, who had apparently finished his rotation just 3 days before his entries, were straightforward professional, noting weather conditions, occasional wildlife sightings, and the rare false alarm. Nothing unusual. Nothing that gave me any pause as the sun began to set that first evening. I stood at the western windows watching the light drain from the sky. The forest below turned from green to gray to black. And then the stars emerged, more stars than I had ever seen in my life. Living in cities, you forget that the night sky is supposed to look like this. A vast, sprawling canvas of light. The Milky Way stretched overhead so bright it almost seemed artificial. I felt small, standing there, significantly small, but also strangely connected to something larger than myself. I heated up a can of chili on the stove and ate dinner while reading a paperback novel I'd brought along, some thriller that I'd been meaning to finish for months. Around 9 p.m. I completed my first official log entry date, weather conditions, visibility, all clear. I noted the time and signed my name, feeling a small thrill of satisfaction at this simple act of documentation. This was my job now. This solitary vigil watching over thousands of acres of wilderness, ready to sound the alarm. If danger appeared, sleep came easily that first night. The bed was surprisingly comfortable, and the mountain air had a quality that made breathing feel like a luxury. I drifted off to the sound of wind moving through the pines below, a soft, rushing whisper that never quite stopped. I woke the next morning to brilliant sunlight streaming through the east windows. I made coffee using the small percolator on the stove and stood watching the forest emerge from shadow as the sun climbed higher. There was something meditative about it, this slow revelation of the landscape. I could see why people did this job year after year. The solitude wasn't oppressive. It was liberating at 700. I performed my first radio check-in. This is Granite Peak. Lookout Tower checking in, I said into the microphone, all clear. Conditions, excellent visibility, unlimited. The response came immediately, crisp and professional, Granite Peak. This is North Sector Base, we copy. Good morning, Jack. Welcome to your first official day. How are you settling in? Good, I replied. The tower's in great shape, everything's functioning normally. I'm looking forward to a quiet season. The coordinator on the other end chuckled. That's what they all say. Let's hope you're right. Check in tomorrow, same time. Stay safe out there will do, I said, and released the transmit button. The day passed in a pleasant rhythm. I familiarized myself with the firefinder, practiced using the binoculars mounted on a tripod near the south window, and took detailed notes on landmarks I could see from my vantage point to the north. A series of jagged peaks, their tops still dusted with snow to the east, an endless carpet of forest, broken occasionally by the silver thread of a creek to the south. More mountains receding into blue distance to the west, the closest thing to civilization. I could see a thin line of smoke from what I assumed was a ranger station, or perhaps a logging operation around 2 p.m. I heard a sound that made me pause. It was faint, distant, but unmistakable. The crackle of a radio transmission. I turned to look at my radio setup, but it was silent. The sound came again. Slightly louder this time, and I realized it was coming from somewhere else in the tower. I searched for a few minutes, opening cabinets and checking under the bed until I found it tucked in a corner behind a stack of old logbooks, an old portable radio much older than my main communications equipment. It was a battered gray box with a telescoping antenna and a dial for tuning frequencies. I picked it up. Examining it, there was a piece of masking tape on the back with faded writing and marker, "Emergency backup, do not remove." I turned it over in my hands, wondering why the previous lookout hadn't mentioned it. Then again, maybe he didn't know about it. Maybe it had been here for years, forgotten and unused. I set it on the desk next to my main radio and made a note in my logbook. Found secondary radio equipment appears functional. Will test later that evening. Twilight settled over the mountains. I heated up another can of soup and sat at the table reading. I was vaguely aware of the wind picking up outside the tower, swaying slightly in the gusts. It was a strange sensation being in a structure that moved. You could feel it in your bones, this gentle back and forth, like being on a ship at sea. I was about to turn in for the night when the old radio crackled to life. The sound made me jump. I stared at the device as static hissed from its small speaker. Then a voice emerged from the noise, faint and distorted but undeniably human. "Anyone there?" the voice said. It was a woman. She sounded young, frightened. "Please, if anyone can hear this, I need help. I'm at the signal." Dissolved into static. My heart was pounding. I grabbed the radio and pressed what I thought was the transmit button. "Hello," I said. "This is Granite Peak, Lookout Tower. I read you. What's your location?" There was no response. Just static. I tried again, adjusting the frequency dial slightly. "This is Granite Peak Lookout Tower. If you can hear me, please respond. What is your emergency?" More static than suddenly clear. As if she were standing right next to me, the woman's voice came through again. "Thank God," she said. "Someone finally heard me. I've been trying for hours. I'm stuck at Olivia's position. I can't make it down the trail. Something's wrong with my leg. I think it's broken. Please, you have to send help." I grabbed a pencil and paper. "Okay, stay calm," I said. "What's your name and what's Olivia's position? Can you give me coordinates?" "My name is..." The signal cut out again, leaving only that endless hiss of static. "Hello?" I said urgently. "Hello, are you still there?" The radio went dead completely, not even static. Just silence. I fiddled with the dials, tried different frequencies, pressed every button on the device, but nothing worked. It was as if the radio had simply given up. I immediately grabbed my main radio and called Base, North Sector Base. "This is Granite Peak. I just received a distress call on secondary equipment. Female voice, claiming to be injured at something called Olivia's position, requesting immediate assistance." There was a pause before the response came. "Granite Peak. Can you repeat that? Olivia's position." "Yes," I said. "That's what she said." "Don't have coordinates." She said she was stuck and had a broken leg. Possible fracture. The transmission was poor. I lost contact. Another pause, longer this time. When the coordinator spoke again, his voice had changed. There was something in it I couldn't quite identify. Confusion, maybe, or concern. "Jack, that secondary radio hasn't been tested recently. I just found it today." I said. It was tucked away in a corner. I was going to check it out when it started receiving the distress call. "Why, what's wrong, Jack?" the coordinator said slowly. "There is no Olivia's position in our system. There never has been. Are you sure that's what you heard?" "I'm certain," I replied. "I heard her clearly twice. She said she was at Olivia's position and needed help." There was a long silence on the other end. I could hear muffled voices as if the coordinator was talking to someone else in the room. Finally, he came back on. "Jack, I'm going to be straight with you. We've had no reports of missing hikers or injuries in your sector. In fact, according to our logs, there's no one authorized to be in that area right now. The nearest trail is 12 miles from your position. That doesn't make sense," I said. I heard her. She was terrified. "Something's wrong. You need to send someone to check. We'll look into it," the coordinator said, his tone professional, but with an edge of skepticism. "Can you describe the voice, age, approximate location based on signal strength? Anything that might help?" I closed my eyes, trying to recall the details. "Young," I said, "maybe late 20s, early 30s. The signal was weak at first, then got stronger." She mentioned she'd been trying to reach someone for hours. "Jack," the coordinator said, "there's something you should know. That secondary radio, the emergency backup, it hasn't been operational in over a decade. We decommissioned those units back in 2008. If it powered on at all, it's probably just picking up interference, maybe a ranger on a different frequency, or even a civilian." "CB operator, atmospheric conditions can do strange things to radio signals up at your elevation." "But she mentioned Olivia's position specifically," I protested. "That's not a random signal. That's someone who knows the area." The coordinator sighed. "Look, Jack, I'm going to send a patrol to sweep the area just to be safe, but I want you to try to get some rest. You've only been up there 2 days. Isolation can play tricks on the mind, especially at night. I've seen it happen before. Good people start hearing things, seeing things. It's more common than you'd think." "I'm not imagining this," I said firmly, but I could hear the doubt creeping into my own voice. "I know you believe that," the coordinator said, "and we're taking it seriously. We'll have a team out at first light. In the meantime, try to get some sleep, and Jack, put that old radio away. It's just going to cause you problems." I acknowledged and signed off, sitting in the darkness of the tower with only the small lamp on my desk providing light. I stared at the old radio, wondering if I really had imagined it, but no. I had heard her clearly twice, her voice desperate, pleading for help. I picked up the radio and examined it more closely. In the better light, the casing was scratched and dented, the antenna slightly bent. When I turned it over, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. Carved into the bottom of the plastic casing were initials: O.R. Olivia Reyes. I thought suddenly, could that be Olivia's position? Not a place, but a person. I grabbed my laptop and pulled up the limited internet access I had through the satellite connection. It was slow, painfully so, but eventually I managed to load a search page. I typed in Olivia Reyes, Montana Fire Lookout, and waited. The results took nearly 5 minutes to load. When they finally did, my blood ran cold. The first result was a news article from 2009, headline: "Fire Lookout Missing Presumed Dead After Disappearance." I clicked through and read the article with growing unease. Olivia Reyes, age 26, had been working as a fire lookout at Black Bear Tower. Approximately 30 miles from my current position, she had failed to make her morning check-in on July 15th, and when a ranger was dispatched to investigate the tower, was empty. There were signs of a hurried departure. Her personal belongings were still there. Food in the pantry, her sleeping bag on the bed. But Olivia herself was gone. A massive search was conducted over the following weeks. Teams of rangers, search dogs, and even helicopters scoured the area. But no trace of Olivia was ever found. No body, no signs of struggle, no clues as to what had happened. She had simply vanished. The official conclusion was that she had likely fallen while hiking, or had some kind of medical emergency in a remote location where she couldn't be found. The case was closed as a tragic accident. but the article mentioned something else that made my hands shake as I read it. Several other lookouts in the region reported hearing strange radio transmissions in the weeks following Olivia's disappearance, calls for help. Static-filled messages that seemed to come from nowhere. The Forest Service had attributed these to grief-stricken colleagues experiencing auditory hallucinations or to atmospheric interference. None of the transmissions were ever verified. I sat back in my chair, my mind racing, the voice I had heard tonight. Could it possibly have been no? I told myself that's insane. People don't broadcast from beyond the grave. There has to be a rational explanation. Maybe someone playing a sick joke, or maybe the coordinator was right. Maybe it was just interference, some random signal bouncing off the ionosphere and landing in my receiver. But those initials OR carved into the radio. I looked at the device again, sitting innocently on my desk, and for the first time since arriving at the tower, I felt a prickling sensation of real fear outside the wind picked up, howling around the tower's corners, and somewhere far below, in the darkness of the forest, I could have sworn I heard a sound like someone calling out a voice carried on the wind, faint and desperate, just out of reach. I didn't sleep well that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard that voice in my head. Desperate pleading, I'm at Olivia's position. I need help around 3 a.m. I gave up trying and instead sat at the desk staring out at the darkness. The forest below was invisible, just an ocean of black beneath the star-filled sky. I kept the old radio in front of me, watching it as if it might suddenly spring to life again, but it remained silent when dawn finally broke. I felt exhausted but wired, the kind of tired where your body wants to shut down but your mind won't let it. I made strong coffee and forced myself to eat some crackers with peanut butter. I needed to stay sharp, needed to think clearly about what was happening at 0700. I made my check-in. Granite Peak. Checking in, I said, all quiet overnight. Visibility good. The coordinator's voice came back, "Morning, Jack. The patrol went out at first light. They swept a 10-mile radius around your position. Found nothing. No signs of any injured hikers, no distress signals, nothing. How are you doing up there?" "I'm fine," I said, though I wasn't sure that was true. "I did some research last night on that name, Olivia. Did you know there was a lookout named Olivia Reyes who disappeared back in 2009? There was a long pause. "Yes. Jack, we're aware of that case. It was a tragedy, but I'm not sure what that has to do with your situation last night. The initials on the radio," I said. "Or Olivia Reyes. And she went missing from a tower not far from here." "Don't you think that's a strange coincidence?" Jack, the coordinator, said, and I could hear the concern in his voice. "Listen to me carefully. Isolation does things to people. You start making connections that aren't there, seeing patterns in random events. Olivia Reyes disappeared 10 years ago. Whatever you heard last night, it wasn't her. Do you understand what I'm saying?" "I understand," I said quietly. "But I don't think I'm losing my mind if that's what you're suggesting." "No one's saying that," the coordinator replied, "but I think it might be good for you to come down for a few days. Take a break. We can send someone else up to cover your rotation." "No," I said quickly. "I'm fine, really. I needed to know about Olivia. That's all. I'm good to stay." "Are you sure? Because there's no shame in admitting when the job gets to be too much." "I'm sure," I said. "I can handle it all right," the coordinator said. "But I want you to check in twice a day from now on. Morning and evening. If we don't hear from you, we're sending someone up." "Understood," I replied. After the call ended, I sat there feeling a mixture of frustration and doubt. Was I making connections that weren't there? The rational part of my brain said yes. Of course you are. You found an old radio. It happened to have someone's initials on it, and you heard a random transmission that your mind connected to a decade-old disappearance. It was coincidence, nothing more, but the other part of my brain, the part that had heard the terror in that woman's voice, wasn't so sure. I decided to search the tower more thoroughly. If this radio had been here for 10 years, maybe there were other things left behind by previous lookouts. I started with the obvious places, the desk drawers, the cabinet under the sink, the small closet where cleaning supplies were kept. I found nothing unusual, just the expected accumulation of supplies and forgotten items, a deck of cards with 2 missing, a half-empty bottle of aspirin, a paperback novel with a broken spine. Then I moved to the less obvious places. I checked behind the fire finder, lifted the mattress on the bed, even unscrewed the vent cover on the small heater in the corner behind the heater. I found something, a small spiral notebook wedged into the gap between the wall and the heating unit. I had to use a ruler to fish it out. The notebook was water damaged and mildewed. The pages stuck together, and when I carefully peeled them apart, the ink was badly smudged, but I could make out enough to understand what I was holding. It was a journal, and on the inside cover, written in careful letters, was a name, Olivia Reyes. My hands trembled as I turned the pages. Most of the entries were mundane observations about weather, wildlife, the slow passage of time. Olivia had good handwriting, neat and precise. She drew little sketches in the margins, birds, clouds, the view from different windows. She had been here for almost 3 months when the entries began to change. June 18th, 2009. Heard something strange on the radio last night, thought it was another tower trying to reach me, but when I responded, there was no answer, just static. And what sounded like breathing. I tried all the frequencies. Nothing. It was probably just interference, Dave said. These old radios pick up all kinds of weird signals. June 22nd, 2009. It happened again last night, the breathing, but this time I heard something else underneath it. Words, maybe I couldn't make them out, but it sounded like someone trying to talk through water or from very far away. I recorded it on my phone, going to play it back and see if I can figure out what it's saying. June 25th, 2009. I'm not sleeping well. The transmissions are coming every night now, always around 2 a.m. I've started to understand some of the words. It sounds like someone calling my name. Olivia. Olivia, over and over, in this wet, hollow voice. I told Dave about it this morning. He thinks I'm stressed out, suggested I come down for a few days, but I can't leave. There's something here, something that needs me. I know how that sounds, but I can feel it. July 1st, 2009. I made contact tonight. I answered when I heard my name, and the voice responded. It said, "It's been waiting." It said, "It's been alone for so long." It said, "It needs me to come find it." I asked where, and the voice said, "Down in the trees at the old place. Follow the markers. I'll know them when I see them." I feel like I should be scared, but I'm not. I'm curious. What if there really is someone out there? What if they need help? July 8th, 2009. I found the first marker today during my afternoon hike. It was exactly where the voice said it would be, a pile of stones arranged in a spiral pattern with a piece of red cloth tied to a branch above it. The cloth is old, practically rotting, but it's definitely a marker. The voice was right. I followed the direction it pointed and found another marker 1/4 mile away, and another beyond that. They're leading deeper into the forest, away from the trails. I'm going to follow them tomorrow. I need to know where they go. July 14th, 2009. This will be my last entry. I'm going tonight. The voice has been insistent, almost angry. It says I've waited long enough. It says, "The time is now. I've packed a bag with supplies. Told Dave I'm going to hike to Clear Creek Falls and back. Should take 2 days, maybe 3. If I take my time, but I'm not going to Clear Creek. I'm following the markers to wherever they lead." I know this is stupid. I know I should tell someone. But what would I say that a voice on the radio has been giving me directions that I've been following mysterious markers into the wilderness? They'd think I'd lost my mind. Maybe I have. But I have to know. I have to see where this goes. If you're reading this and I haven't come back, follow the spiral stones. Start at the northeast corner of the clearing where the fire scar is. You'll know it when you see it. Follow the markers. They'll take you to the entry, ended there mid-sentence, as if Olivia had been interrupted or had simply run out of time. I stared at the page, feeling ice water in my veins. She had followed something into the forest, following markers left by whatever had been calling to her on the radio, and she had never come back. I thought about the search parties that had looked for her. They wouldn't have known about the markers, wouldn't have known to look for spiral patterns of stones and red cloth. They had searched the official trails, the likely places a lost hiker might go. But Olivia hadn't gotten lost. She had walked deliberately into the wilderness, following instructions from something that spoke through the static. And now, 10 years later, that same something was using the radio again. I grabbed my binoculars and went to the northeast window, scanning the clearing below. It took me a few minutes, but I found it a patch of forest where the trees were noticeably younger and scruffier. A fire scar that had grown over in the decades since Olivia's disappearance. I could just barely make out what might have been the edge of the clearing she mentioned. I should have called base right then, should have told them what I'd found. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the certainty that they wouldn't believe me, that they'd think the isolation had gotten to me. Or maybe it was something else, a growing compulsion to understand what had happened to Olivia, to follow the trail she had started. I spent the rest of the day preparing. I filled a backpack with supplies, water bottles, energy bars, a first aid kit, my headlamp and spare batteries. I charged my phone, even though there was no signal up here. At least the GPS function would work. I took photos of every page of Olivia's journal, with my phone careful to capture even the water-damaged sections, and I studied the topographic map of the area, marking the location of the fire scar and planning a route. As evening approached, I made my regular check-in with base. Everything normal. I reported visibility. Excellent, no smoke, all quiet. The lie came easily, and that should have worried me, but it didn't. After dark, I sat at the desk, watching the old radio. I had moved it to the center of the table and positioned a small lamp to illuminate it. The shadows in the tower seemed deeper tonight, the corners darker. I kept catching movement in my peripheral vision, but when I turned to look, there was nothing there at exactly 2 a.m. The radio crackled to life. My whole body tensed as static filled the small room. Then, the voice emerged. The same woman's voice I'd heard the night before, but this time there was no fear in it. Instead, she sounded calm, almost peaceful. "Jack," the voice said. And my blood turned to ice. "She knows my name. You found my journal, didn't you?" I knew someone would eventually. I knew someone would understand. "How do you know my name?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "I've been watching," the voice replied. "I've been here the whole time, waiting in the spaces between the trees, in the static between frequencies. 10 years of waiting, Jack. 10 years of calling out, hoping someone would listen. And finally, you did, finally. Someone heard me. What do you want?" I asked the same thing I wanted when I was alive, the voice said. "To understand. To know what's out here in these woods. There's something. Jack, something old. Something that's been here longer than the trees, longer than the mountains. It speaks through the radio, through the static. It showed me things before I died. Beautiful, terrible things. And now it wants to show you." "I'm not following any markers into the forest," I said firmly. "Whatever happened to you, I'm not letting it happen to me." The voice laughed. But it wasn't a cruel sound. It was sad, almost pitiful. "You think you have a choice. You found the journal, you read my words, the markers are already calling to you. Even now, part of you wants to follow them, wants to see where they lead. I know because I felt it too. The pull, the curiosity, it's already inside you, Jack, growing like a seed." "You're wrong," I said. The voice asked. "Then why haven't you called for help? Why didn't you tell them about the journal? Why are you sitting there in the dark talking to a dead woman on a radio that shouldn't work?" I had no answer to that. "Come find me." "Jack," the voice said softly, "I'm still out here, still waiting at the end of the trail, where the markers stop, where the old place is. I can show you what I found. I can show you what's been hiding in these mountains for centuries. All you have to do is follow the stones, follow the red cloth, follow my voice." The radio went silent. I sat there for a long time, staring at the device, my heart pounding in my chest. She was right about one thing. I hadn't called for help, hadn't told anyone about the journal, and deep down in a place I didn't want to examine too closely, I knew why. It was the same reason Olivia had followed the markers, the same reason she had walked into the forest knowing it was dangerous. I wanted to know, I wanted to understand what was out there in the darkness, what had taken Olivia, what was still calling out through the static after all these years. The rational part of my brain, was screaming at me to call base to report everything, to get off this mountain and never come back. But the other part, the part that had heard the wonder in Olivia's voice when she described the markers, the part that felt the pull of the unknown like a fishhook in my chest, that part was already planning the hike, already imagining what I might find at the end of the trail. I looked out the window at the forest below, invisible in the darkness. Somewhere out there, the markers weighted spiral patterns of stone and scraps of red cloth leading deeper into the wilderness, leading to the old place. Whatever that meant. Leading to answers, or maybe to the same fate that had claimed Olivia Reyes. I had maybe 3 hours until dawn, 3 hours to decide whether to follow the rational path and call for help, or to follow something else entirely, something that whispered promises of understanding and revelation through the static of an old radio. As I sat there wrestling with the decision, I noticed something that made my decision for me. There on the desk next to the radio was my backpack, the one I'd packed earlier for a day hike, and sitting on top of it was Olivia's journal, open to the last page where her final entry ended mid-sentence. I didn't remember putting them there, didn't remember arranging them that way, but there they were waiting for me, like an invitation. I couldn't refuse. I left the tower at dawn. The forest was wrapped in a thick mist that clung to everything, making the world feel smaller, more intimate. I'd made my morning check-in early, telling base I was planning a routine perimeter hike to familiarize myself with the terrain. Another lie to add to the growing collection. The coordinator had wished me a good day and told me to stay safe. Standard protocol, neither of us knowing that I was about to walk off into the wilderness, following the trail of a dead woman. The backpack felt heavy on my shoulders, heavier than it should have been for just a day's supplies. I had Olivia's journal in a plastic bag to protect it from the moisture. I had my phone with its GPS active, tracking my route. I had water and food and a compass and a knife and everything a responsible hiker should carry. But I also had something else, a feeling of inevitability, like I was following a script written long before I arrived at this tower. The fire scar was easy to find in daylight, a rough oval of younger trees and underbrush, standing out against the older growth around it. I skirted the edge, looking for the clearing Olivia had mentioned, and found it on the northeast side, a small open space where the ground was still slightly charred beneath the new vegetation, and there at the far edge was the first marker. It was exactly as Olivia had described. A spiral pattern of stones, maybe 3 feet across, with a piece of red cloth, tied to a branch directly above it. The cloth was faded and tattered, eaten away by years of weather. But it was unmistakably placed deliberately. The stones themselves were smooth river rocks that someone had carried here and arranged with care. The spiral wound inward, clockwise ending at a small white stone in the center. I took a photo of it, then checked my compass. The marker pointed northeast, deeper into the forest, away from any established trails. I looked back at the tower, just visible through the trees, a small brown square perched on its skeletal legs. I could still turn back, could still climb those stairs and pretend none of this was happening. Instead, I stepped forward into the trees. The forest was dense, here the mist turning everything into soft silhouettes. I had to move slowly, picking my way over fallen logs and around thick patches of undergrowth. The ground rose steadily, the elevation increasing as I moved away from the tower. I checked my GPS every few minutes, marking my progress on the digital map. I found the second marker exactly where Olivia said it would be, a quarter mile from the first. This one was different. Instead of stones, it was carved into the bark of a massive Douglas fir, the same spiral pattern cut deep into the wood, but old, very old. The carving had stretched and distorted as the tree grew, the spiral now elongated and warped, but still recognizable. Another piece of red cloth hung from a nearby branch. I touched the carving, feeling the rough texture of the old wood. Whoever had made this had done it decades ago, maybe longer. Long before Olivia, long before me. How many people had followed these markers over the years? How many had walked this same path into the forest? I kept moving. The markers appeared at irregular intervals. Sometimes I'd walk only a few hundred yards before finding the next one. Other times I'd search for 20 minutes, convinced I'd lost the trail, only to spot a flash of red cloth or the distinctive spiral pattern carved into stone or wood. They led me steadily northeast and upward. The terrain becoming steeper and more rugged around noon, I stopped to rest at a small stream. The water was crystal clear and ice cold. I refilled my bottles and ate an energy bar while checking my position on the GPS. I had traveled almost 4 miles from the tower and gained nearly 1,000 feet in elevation. I was well beyond any marked trails now in a part of the forest that probably saw fewer than a dozen hikers a year, if that. As I sat there, I became aware of the silence. The forest should have been full of soundbirds, insects, the rustle of small animals in the underbrush, but there was nothing. Just the gurgle of the stream and my own breathing. It was as if the woods around me were holding their breath, waiting for something. I stood up, shouldered my pack, and kept moving. The afternoon wore on, and the markers continued, each one leading me deeper into the wilderness. I passed through groves of ancient cedars, their trunks wider than my arm span. I crossed rocky outcrops that offered brief views of the surrounding mountains. Endless peaks stretching to the horizon. I descended into a ravine so steep I had to use roots and branches to keep from sliding, and then climbed up the other side, my legs burning with the effort. And through it all, the silence persisted, that unnatural absence of sound that made every footstep seem too loud, every breath too harsh. I was beginning to wonder if I would find anything at all, if maybe the markers just led in circles or ended at some random point in the forest, when I crested a ridge and saw it, the old place. It was a structure of some kind nestled in a small valley below me, mostly hidden by trees and overgrowth, but unmistakably man-made. The walls were made of stone, fitted together without mortar, in the ancient style. Parts of the roof had collapsed, leaving gaps where I could see the sky through what looked like wooden beams. The whole thing was maybe 30 feet long and half as wide, covered in moss and vines, like the forest was slowly reclaiming it. I felt a chill run down my spine. This wasn't a fire lookout tower or a ranger station. This was something much older, something that had been here long before the Forest Service, long before Montana was even a state. I made my way down the ridge, moving carefully. The markers led right to the structure, becoming more frequent as I got closer. Stones, spirals carved into rocks, red cloth tied to every third tree, like a path of breadcrumbs leading to the entrance. The doorway was a simple opening in the stone. No door, just a rectangular gap, maybe 6 feet high and 3 feet wide. Darkness beyond. I stopped outside, taking out my flashlight. The beam cut through the gloom, revealing an interior. A single room with a dirt floor. The walls were covered in carvings, more spirals, but also other symbols that I didn't recognize. Angular shapes and patterns that hurt my eyes when I tried to focus on them. And in the center of the room was a chair. It was made of wood, dark with age, and carved all over with the same spiral pattern as the markers. A figure sat in the chair. And for one horrible moment, I thought it was Olivia. Thought I'd found her body preserved by the cold, dry air of the mountains. Then I realized it wasn't a body at all. It was a scarecrow or something. Like a scarecrow, a human-shaped frame wrapped in old clothes with a burlap sack for a head. Someone had drawn a face on the sack, simple eyes and a smile. The red cloth was wrapped around its neck like a scarf. I stepped into the structure, my flashlight beam moving across the walls. The carving seemed to shift in the moving light, creating an illusion of movement along the walls. There were other things scattered on the floor. Offerings, maybe small piles of stones, feathers, bones arranged in patterns. A rusted camping lantern, several empty water bottles, a tattered backpack that might have been Olivia's. And then I saw the radio. It was sitting on the ground next to the chair, the same model as the one in the tower, old and gray with a telescoping antenna. The power light was on, glowing faintly red in the darkness. That's impossible. I thought, there's no power source up here, no batteries, no electricity. The radio shouldn't be working, shouldn't even be capable of turning on. But as I stared at it, the radio crackled to life. "You found it," the voice said. Olivia's voice. "Welcome to the old place." "Jack, welcome to where I ended and where you'll begin." I spun around, expecting to see someone standing behind me, but the doorway was empty, just the mist-shrouded forest beyond. "What is this place?" I asked, my voice echoing slightly off the stone walls. "This is where it lives," the voice replied. "Where it's always lived, the thing that speaks through the static that calls to us, through the radio waves. It's old, Jack, older than anything you can imagine, and it's hungry for connection, for understanding, for people who can hear its voice." "You're not Olivia," I said. "I'm talking to it, aren't I? The thing that lured her here?" The radio was silent for a moment. Then the voice came back different now, deeper, with a quality that made my teeth ache. Olivia was special. It said she could hear me. Clearly could understand what I was offering. So I showed her the way, showed her the markers, the path. She came willingly, eager to see. Wanted to know what I was as what I am. "What are you?" I asked. "I am the space between the voice." Said I am the silence in the static, the gap in the frequencies. I am what waits in the forgotten places, calling out, hoping someone will listen. I've been here since before the mountains were named, before humans walked these valleys. I've watched. I've waited. And occasionally someone hears me. Someone follows the markers to this place. "What happened to Olivia? She's still here," the voice said. "She became part of me, part of the silence she's in, the walls in the stones, in every spiral, marker in the forest. Her voice, her thoughts, her fear and wonder, all of it absorbed. Integrated now, she calls out. With me, drawing others, helping me find new people who can hear. I back toward the doorway, my hand fumbling for my phone. I need to document this. I thought need to record this as evidence, but when I looked at my phone, the screen was black dead, despite having a full charge that morning. "You can't leave," the voice said. "Not yet. You came all this way, followed all the markers you wanted to understand, wanted to know the truth, and now you do. Now you know what's been hiding in these mountains, calling out through the static for all these years. I can leave," I said, my voice shaking. "I am leaving right now." The scarecrow in the chair moved. It wasn't much, just a slight turn of the head, a shifting of the shoulders, but it was enough to freeze me in place, the burlap sack head tilted toward me, and I could see now that the drawn-on eyes weren't just simple marks. They were elaborate, intricate spirals that seemed to rotate slowly in the beam of my flashlight. "Stay," the voice said through the radio. "Stay and become part of the silence. Become another voice, calling out another marker on the path. You'll help us find the next one, and the next one, and the one after that. You'll be here forever, Jack. Part of something greater than yourself. Part of the old place." "No," I said, and ran. I burst out of the structure into the mist, my flashlight beam bouncing wildly as I scrambled up the ridge behind me. I could hear something, not footsteps exactly, but a sound like wind through hollow spaces, like breath through a vast empty throat. I ran blindly, following the downward slope of the terrain. Branches whipped at my face, roots caught at my feet. I fell twice, bruising my hands and knees, but I got up and kept running. The backpack bounced against my spine. Olivia's journal inside, feeling like an anchor trying to drag me down. I don't know how long I ran. Time seemed elastic, stretched thin in some moments and compressed in others. The mist got thicker until I could barely see 5 feet ahead, but I kept moving, kept putting distance between myself and the old place. Eventually, I burst out of the trees onto a rocky outcrop and realized with a sinking feeling that I had no idea where I was. The GPS on my phone was dead. The compass in my pack was spinning uselessly, unable to find magnetic north, and the mist was so thick I couldn't see any landmarks. I was lost. I stood there, gasping for breath, trying to think rationally. I had to get back to the tower, had to report what I'd found, had to warn people about the old place and the thing that lived there, but which direction was the tower, east-west? I couldn't tell then. I heard it faint and distant, carried on the wind, a voice calling my name. Jack, the voice said. Olivia's voice? Or the thing pretending to be her Jack? You can't run from this. You're part of it now. You followed the markers. You came to the old place. The silence is inside you, already growing, spreading. Soon, you'll hear it all the time, not just through the radio, but in your own thoughts, your own voice. And then you'll come back. You'll return to the old place, and you'll sit in the chair, and you'll become another marker on the path. No. I shouted into the mist. No, I'm getting out of here. I'm going back. But even as I said it, I felt something in my chest, a tightness, a pressure, like something was pushing against my ribs from the inside, and beneath it, barely audible. I could hear it static, the sound of empty frequencies searching for signal, the sound of the silence beginning to fill me up. I stumbled forward, picking a direction at random, and started walking. The mist swirled around me, thick and cold, and somewhere behind me I could hear that hollow breathing sound. Getting closer, I walked for hours through the mist, my sense of direction completely gone. Every tree looked the same, every rock, every hollow in the ground. I'd check my compass and watch the needle spin in useless circles. I'd pull out my phone and see nothing but a dead black screen. The forest had become a maze, and I was trapped inside it. The static in my chest grew louder. I could feel it now, like a vibration in my bones, a frequency that my body was picking up and amplifying with every step it took. It got stronger, until I could almost hear it without the radio, almost make out words in that endless hiss of white noise around what I thought was mid-afternoon, though the mist made it impossible to tell time. The sun just a vague brightening in the gray. I came across a marker. It was a spiral of stones identical to the ones I'd followed to the old place, red cloth hanging from a branch above it. I stared at it in disbelief. I'd been moving away from that place. I was certain of it. I'd been traveling downhill, heading back toward the tower, but here was a marker I walked past, it refusing to look, refusing to acknowledge it. But 20 minutes later, I found another and then another after that, each marker like a signpost pointing me back the way I'd come, back toward the stone structure and the thing that waited there. "You're making this," I said aloud, my voice sounding strange in the muffled quiet. "You're creating these markers, trying to turn me around." The only answer was the static growing louder in my chest. I changed direction again, moving perpendicular to the line of markers I pushed through. Thick undergrowth, climbed over fallen logs, moved as fast as I dared in the limited visibility. I would not go back to that place, would not let that thing claim me the way it had claimed Olivia. But the markers kept appearing no matter which direction I traveled. No matter how many times I changed course, I kept finding them. Spirals of stone carvings in tree bark, scraps of red cloth hanging like strange fruit. They were everywhere now, as if the entire forest had become a path leading to the old place, as if there was no direction I could travel that wouldn't eventually bring me back. As darkness began to fall, the mist grew even thicker. I could barely see my own hands in front of my face. I knew I should stop, should make camp and wait for daylight, but the thought of spending a night out here alone in the dark, with that static growing louder in my chest, was unbearable. So I kept moving. I don't remember when I started hearing the voices plural, not just Olivia anymore, but others, men and women, young and old, speaking through the static in my chest. They whispered fragments of sentences, pieces of thoughts. "Come back, turn around. You belong here, join us. The silence is beautiful. You'll see." I tried to ignore them, tried to focus on the physical act of walking, but they grew louder, more insistent, and beneath their words, I could hear that breathing sound, that hollow wind through empty spaces that had followed me from the old place. It was closer now, much closer, as if something massive was moving through the forest just behind me, staying hidden in the mist. My foot caught on something and I fell hard, hitting the ground with enough force to knock the wind out of me. I lay there gasping, and when I finally managed to sit up, I realized what I'd tripped over. A boot. There was a foot still inside it, attached to a leg that disappeared into the undergrowth. With shaking hands, I used my flashlight to follow the leg to a body. It was a man, or what was left of one. He'd been here for years, judging by the state of decay, the bones showing through tattered clothes. His skull was turned toward me, the empty eye sockets filled with moss, and in his skeletal hand he clutched an old radio, identical to the ones in the tower and the old place. I scrambled backward, my heart hammering. How many people had followed the markers over the years? How many had ended up like this, wandering until they died, or worse, until they made it to the old place and became part of whatever that thing was? I had to get out, had to find my way back to civilization, back to people who could help. But as I stood up, I realized something that made my blood turn to ice. I couldn't remember which direction I'd been traveling. The mist was disorienting and the fall had turned me around. I had no idea which way led back to the tower and which way led deeper into the wilderness. I spun in a slow circle, my flashlight beam cutting through the gray, but every direction looked the same. And then I saw them, figures standing in the mist, just at the edge of my flashlight's reach. There were dozens of them, maybe more human-shaped, but wrong somehow. Their proportions off their movements, too smooth, too fluid. They didn't walk so much as glide, shifting position. When I wasn't looking directly at them, getting closer with each eye. Blink the scarecrows, I thought. But no, these were something else, something that had been hiding in the forest all along the thing's body. Perhaps, or bodies. The physical manifestation of the silence that spoke through the radio. They formed a circle around me and slowly began to close in. I ran again, crashing through the undergrowth with no plan except to get away from those figures. The flashlight beam bounced wildly, showing me snapshots of the forest trees. Missed more markers everywhere, markers leading me in circles, bringing me back again and again to the same place. And then suddenly, I broke through the tree line and found myself standing in a clearing. The tower rose before me. Impossibly. My tower, Granite Peak Lookout, standing exactly where I'd left it that morning. Lights burning in the windows, warm and inviting relief flooded through me, so intense I nearly collapsed. I'd made it back somehow despite everything. I'd found my way home. I started toward it, my legs shaking with exhaustion, and then I stopped. Something was wrong. The tower looked right, but it wasn't right. The proportions were slightly off the angle of the stairs, not quite matching my memory. And there in the window, I could see a figure standing backlit by the lamp inside, watching me, watching and waiting. This isn't my tower, I realized with creeping horror. This is another lure, another trap. The thing is showing me what I want to see, trying to draw me in. I backed away slowly. The tower's door swung open, and the figure stepped out onto the platform. It was wearing clothes like mine, had a backpack like mine. But its face was wrong, a smooth, blank surface like a mannequin that hadn't been painted yet. It raised one hand and waved. "Come inside, Jack," a voice called down. It was my voice, exactly as my voice. "You must be tired, you must be cold, come inside and rest." I turned and plunged back into the forest. I don't know how long I ran. Time had stopped, meaning anything in the mist. I fell repeatedly, scraping my hands and face. Bloody, I lost my backpack at some point, snagged on a branch that I didn't see until too late. I kept moving on, pure adrenaline, my body operating on autopilot while my mind screamed in panic. The static in my chest had become deafening. I could barely hear my own thoughts over it, could barely distinguish between my internal voice and the one speaking through the frequency. "You're one of us now," they said. "You're part of the silence. You'll never leave." But I had to leave. Had to get out. Had to warn people. Dawn came. Eventually, the mist beginning to thin as the sun rose. I found myself on a ridge overlooking a valley, and there, far below, I saw something that made me sob with relief. A road. It was a thin line of black asphalt cutting through the forest, and on it I could see a vehicle moving a ranger truck by the look of it. Real, genuine human civilization. I scrambled down the ridge, falling and sliding, moving as fast as gravity would allow. I could hear something behind me, that breathing sound, that hollow wind. But I didn't look back. I focused on the road, on the truck, on escape. I hit the tree line at a run and stumbled onto the asphalt just as the truck was passing. It screeched to a halt and a ranger jumped out. A woman in her 40s with graying hair and concerned eyes. "Jesus Christ," she said, rushing toward me. "Are you okay? What happened?" I tried to answer, tried to explain about the markers and the old place and the thing that spoke through the static, but all that came out was a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob. She grabbed my arm, supporting me as my legs gave out. "We need to get you to a hospital," she said, guiding me toward the truck. "You're in shock." "No," I managed to say. "The tower, Granite Peak. I'm the lookout. I got lost. There's something in the forest, something that lures people." She helped me into the passenger seat and grabbed her radio base. "This is Ranger Chen. I've got a lost hiker on Route 12 near mile marker 34 requesting medical assistance. He's disoriented, possibly hypothermic." "I'm not hypothermic," I said. "The static, the radio. Did you hear it?" She gave me a worried look. "Just hang on. Help is coming." As we waited, I became aware that the static in my chest had faded to a barely perceptible hum. The voices were gone. The sense of pressure released. I was out. I'd made it out of the forest, away from the old place, away from the thing that had claimed Olivia and countless others. 2 hours later, I was in a hospital in Whitefish, being examined by doctors who found nothing physically wrong with me. No hypothermia, no injuries beyond some scrapes and bruises, but they kept me for observation anyway. Concerned about my mental state, the Forest Service coordinator came to see me that evening. I told him everything about Olivia's journal, the markers, the old place, the thing that spoke through the radio. He listened without interrupting, his face carefully neutral. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "We found your backpack, Jack, about 3 miles from the tower. You've been walking in circles most of the day. We tracked your route on GPS. Your phone transmitted your location the whole time." "That's impossible," I said. "My phone was dead." He shook his head and showed me a map with a red line tracing my path. I'd never gone more than 5 miles from the tower, had looped around it repeatedly, sometimes passing within a few hundred yards of it without realizing I found Olivia's journal. I insisted there's a stone structure in the forest with radios and markers. "And Jack," he said gently, "we know about the journal. Derek, the lookout before you found it and turned it in months ago. It's part of Olivia's file. We know she was experiencing auditory hallucinations before she disappeared. It's documented. We think you found Derek's notes about it, and your mind filled in the rest. Isolation and stress can cause vivid hallucinations. Show me the structure." "Then," I said, "if I'm making it up, show me on a map where I went. I can point out exactly where it is." He showed me the map. I looked at it, at the red line, tracing my wandering path, and felt my certainty crumble. I'd walked in loops and circles, but I'd never gone to the place I thought I'd been. The valley where I'd seen the stone structure didn't exist. According to the GPS, I'd never been there. They released me 3 days later with a recommendation for therapy and a firm suggestion that I not return to fire lookout work. I agreed readily. I never wanted to see another tower again. But here's the thing that keeps me awake at night. When I got back to my apartment in Seattle, I found something in my jacket pocket. Something I hadn't put there. A smooth white stone the size of my palm, and carved into its surface in perfect detail was a spiral. I threw it away. Immediately drove to a public dumpster and watched them take it. But sometimes late at night, I hear it. The static in my chest, faint, but growing stronger. And I know that I brought something back with me from those mountains, something that followed me home. The thing in the forest had let me go, or maybe it had let me think I'd escaped. Because now when I turn on my radio, any radio, I hear them, the voices speaking through the static, Dozens of them, hundreds, maybe calling out to each other across the frequencies. And sometimes when it's very quiet, I hear my own voice among them calling out, waiting, marking the path for the next person who will listen. I'm writing this down because I need someone to know, because I can feel myself changing, the silence growing inside me. Soon, I won't be able to resist anymore. Soon I'll have to go back to the mountains, back to the old place, back to where I belong. If you're reading this, if you work as a fire lookout or spend time alone in the wilderness, please listen carefully. If you hear voices on the radio, voices that shouldn't be there calling your name, offering to show you something, don't answer, don't follow. Don't believe them when they say you're special, that you're the one who can finally understand. Because once you hear the silence, once you let it inside you, never really leave the forest. You just carry it with you wherever you go, waiting, listening, becoming another voice in the static, calling out to the next person who will listen.